Waiting to hear from Prime Minister Narendra Modi deliver the keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is just moments away. And we're bringing you live visuals from the venue of the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. These are live visuals coming to you from the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore, where Prime Minister Modi is seated on the stage and is moments away from delivering the first keynote speech of the annual Shangri-La Dialogue. Remember, this is the first time any Indian Premier will be doing so. All right, just to bring our viewers up to speed with the latest news coming in from Singapore. These are live visuals coming to you from the Shangri-La Dialogue, where Prime Minister Modi is moments away from delivering the keynote speech.
Delegates, welcome to the 17th Asia Security Summit, the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. Since 2002, this summit has provided the diplomatic equivalent of economies of scale to regional security policymaking. This year we have brought together over 575 delegates from some 40 countries, with the highest ever number of full defense ministers participating. Our agenda has been refreshed with the most pressing issues of the day at the front and center of our deliberations. Allow me to thank all of our sponsors and the host government of Singapore for their tremendous support. We have developed the platform, set the stage, convened the participants, and we will soon hand it over to all of you to make the most of this defense diplomatic opportunity. While I have never attended a conference where the host did not style the event as timely, who present here today or watching from abroad would doubt that this Shangri-La Dialogue is taking place at a crucial time and in the right place? A great deal of work can be done here and now in Singapore to make June 2018 a memorable month in the history of this region's security development. At the IISS, we generate facts, produce analysis, and exert influence in the service of a better understanding by governments, the private sector, and the experts and opinion-forming communities on questions of conflict, however caused, that may have an important military content. This year, we celebrate our 60th anniversary. Since so many of our good friends are in this hall tonight, let me, on behalf of the Institute's trustees and council, thank you for your interest in and support for the work that the IISS conducts. For this Shangri-La Dialogue, we have put before you the very best of our facts and analysis relevant to this region. The IISS 2018 Asia-Pacific Regional Security Assessment contains 12 detailed essays on issues as vital as the North Korean challenge, the implications of the siege of Marawi, ballistic missile defense in Asia, submarine and anti-submarine warfare capabilities in the Asia-Pacific, freedom of navigation patrols, the role of regional security mechanisms, and much more. For military facts on the region, the IISS Military Balance Book, begun in 1959 as a 16-page pamphlet and now a 600-page encyclopedia, has been the best general resource. Now we have something better. The Military Balance Plus relational electronic database we have created revolutionizes the ability to interrogate our data. A user of the IISS Military Balance book, wanting to know which countries around the world operate active radar homing air-to-air missiles, would get the right answer in 4 hours and 45 minutes. A user of the database will get the right answer in 50 seconds. A user of the book wanting to know how many and what types of submarines are currently operated in Asia would get the right answer in about 45 minutes. A user of the IISS database in 20 seconds. Someone wanting to compare China's current defense spending in US dollars with that of, say, the 10 ASEAN states combined would calculate that correctly in about 2 hours using the book, but with the database in 50 seconds. The ability, therefore, to be able to ask numerous complex questions of the data and get answers in minutes rather than in days is transformative. Indeed, we believe that the IISS Military Balance Plus has the potential to change defense analysis as dramatically as the Bloomberg terminal changed access to financial information. And so we will be speaking to a number of you over this weekend about how to get access to this splendid analytical tool. For the IISS, objective facts and clear-headed analysis are important for the encouragement of transparent strategic debate. Also vital is to ensure that different national perspectives are brought to bear on the discussion of complex regional issues. The very definition of the region geopolitically is changing, as some stick to the Asia-Pacific nomenclature and others migrate, so to speak, to the Indo-Pacific moniker. Certainly, the Pacific and Indian Oceans are increasingly acknowledged as a single, integrated strategic theater. It is in recognition of that reality that we invited as our keynote speaker this evening to help frame our discussions for this Shangri-La Dialogue the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, known for his decisive leadership both at home and abroad. 4 years ago, Narendra Modi was elected the leader of a country of 1.3 billion people with a resounding electoral mandate. His Bharatiya Janata Party became the first party in 3 decades to win an outright majority of seats in the federal parliament. This success was further enhanced through successive victories in state elections, with the BJP and its allies now forming governments in 20 of India's 29 states. Prime Minister Modi has unveiled a vision of a new India based on development opportunities and the economic and social transformation that he has initiated. He has taken tough decisions on the economy, including the earlier demonetization of the currency and the implementation of the goods and services tax. With government growth expected at 7.4% at least this year, India will once again become the fastest growing large economy in the world. Later this year, or early next year, India is also expected to overtake the UK to become the 5th largest economy in the world. This provides India a greater profile on the world stage, underpinned by the Prime Minister's personal style and flair for diplomacy, coupled to his focus on Indian diaspora communities worldwide. Last year, he became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. This year, he was the first to host all ASEAN leaders at India's Republic Day parade, and his participation in this year's Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit in London was the first for an Indian Prime Minister for nearly a decade. One of Prime Minister Modi's earliest foreign policy decisions was to rename India's existing Look East policy Act East, highlighting India's renewed focus on ASEAN states and shifting the emphasis of what had previously been an economic and trade-based policy to one aimed at nurturing political and security relationships. We look forward to what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has to say about India's foreign and security policy priorities in the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister, this podium and the floor is yours. Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, thank you for your friendship, your leadership of India-Singapore partnership, and a better future for the region. Defence Minister, Mr. John Shipman, dignitaries and excellencies, Namaskar, and a very good evening to all of you. I am pleased to return to a region known to India since ancient times as Swarna Bhumi, the land of gold. I am also happy to be here in a special year, in a landmark year of India's relationship with ASEAN. In January, we had the unique honor of hosting 10 ASEAN leaders on our Republic Day. The ASEAN-India Summit was a testimony of our commitment to ASEAN and our Act East policy. For thousands of years, Indians have turned to the East, not just to see the sunrise, but also to pray for its light, to spread over the entire world. The humankind now looks to the rising East with the hope to see the promise that this 21st century beholds for the whole world. Because the destiny of the world will be deeply influenced by the course of developments in the Indo-Pacific region. Because this new age of promise is also caught in shifting plates of global politics and the fault lines of history. I'm here to say that the future we seek does not have to be as elusive as Shangri-La, that we can shape this region in our collective hopes and aspirations. Nowhere is it more apt to pursue this than in Singapore. The great nation shows us that when the oceans are open, the seas are secure, countries are connected, the rule of law prevails, and the region is stable, nations, small and large, prosper as sovereign countries. Free and fearless in their choices. Singapore also shows that when nations stand on the side of principles, not behind one power or the other, they earn the respect of the world and a voice in international affairs. And when they embrace diversity at home, they seek an inclusive world outside. For India, though, Singapore means more. It's a spirit that unites a lion nation and a lion city. Singapore is our springboard to ASEAN. It has been for centuries a gateway for India to the East. For over 2,000 years, the winds of monsoons, the currents of seas, and the forces of human aspirations have built timeless links between India and this region. It was cast in peace and friendship, religion and culture, art and commerce, language and literature. These human links have lasted even as the tides of politics and trade show their ebb and flow. Over the past 3 decades, we have reclaimed that heritage to restore our role and relationship in the region. For India, no region now receives as much attention as this, and for good reasons. Oceans had an important place in Indian thinking since pre-Vedic times. Thousands of years ago, the Indus Valley civilization, as well as Indian peninsula, had maritime trade. Oceans and Varuna, the Lord of all waters, find a prominent place in the world's oldest book, the Vedas. In ancient Puranas, written thousands of years ago, the geographical definition of India is with reference to the seas. Uttaro yat samudrasya, meaning the land which it lies to the north of the seas. Lothal, in my home state Gujarat, was among the world's oldest ports. Even today, there are remains of a dock. No wonder Gujaratis are enterprising and travel widely even today. The Indian Ocean has shaped much of India's history. It now holds the key to our future. The ocean carries 90% of India's trade and our energy sources. It is also the lifeline of global commerce. The Indian Ocean connects regions of diverse cultures and different levels of peace and prosperity. It also now bears ships of major powers. Both raise concerns of stability and contest. To the east, the Malacca Strait and South China Sea connect India to the Pacific and to most of our major partners, ASEAN, Japan, Republic of Korea, China, and the Americas. Our trade in the region is growing rapidly, and a significant part of our overseas investments flow in this direction. ASEAN alone accounts for over 20%. Our interests in the region are vast, and our engagements is deep. In the Indian Ocean region, our relationships are becoming stronger. We are also helping build economic capabilities and improve maritime security for our friends and partners. We promote collective security through forums like Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. We are advancing a comprehensive agenda of regional cooperation through Indian Ocean Rim Association. And we also work with partners beyond the Indian Ocean region to ensure that the global transit routes remain peaceful and free for all. 3 years ago in Mauritius, I described our vision in one word, Sagar, which means ocean in Hindi. And Sagar stands for security and growth for all in the region. And that is the creed we follow to our east. Now even more vigorously through our Act East policy, by seeking a joint India, especially our east and northeast with our land and maritime partners to the east. Southeast Asia is our neighbor by land and sea. With each Southeast Asian country, we have growing political, economic, and defense ties. With ASEAN, from dialogue partners, we have become strategic partners over the course of 25 years. We pursue our relations through annual summits and 30 dialogue mechanisms, but even more through a shared vision for the region and the comfort and familiarity of our old links. We are active participants in Asia-led institutions like East Asia Summit, ADMM Plus, and ARF. We are part of BIMSTEC and Mekong-Ganga Economic Corridor, a bridge between South and Southeast Asia. Our ties with Japan, from economic to strategic, have been completely transformed. It is a partnership of great substance and purpose that is cornerstone of India's Act East policy. There is a strong momentum in our cooperation with Republic of Korea, and there is a fresh energy in our partnership with Australia and also New Zealand. With several of our partners, we meet in formats of 3 or more. More than 3 years ago, I landed at dawn in Fiji to start a successful new phase of engagement with Pacific Island nations. The meetings of the Forum of India Pacific Islands Cooperation, FIPIC, have bridged the distance of geography through shared interest and action. Beyond East and Southeast Asia, our partnerships are strong and growing. It is a measure of our strategic autonomy that India's strategic partnership with Russia has matured to be special and privileged. 10 days ago, in an informal summit at Sochi, President Putin and I shared views on the need for a strong multipolar world order for dealing with the challenges of our times. At the same time, India's global strategic partnership with the United States has overcome the hesitation of history and continues to deepen across the extraordinary breadth of our relationship. It has in the changing world. And an important pillar of this partnership is our shared vision of an open, stable, secure, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. No other relationship of India has as many layers as our relations with China. We are the world's two most populous countries and among the fastest growing major economies. Our cooperation is expanding, trade is growing, and we have displayed maturity and wisdom in managing issues and ensuring a peaceful border. In April, a two-day informal summit with President Xi helped us cement our understanding that strong and stable relations between our two nations are an important factor for global peace and progress. I firmly believe that Asia and the world will have a better future when India and China work together in trust and confidence, sensitive to each other's interests. India has a growing partnership with Africa, propelled through mechanisms such as India-Africa Forum Summits. At its core, our cooperation based on Africa's requirements and a history of warmth and mutual respect. Friends, coming back to our region, India's growing engagement is accompanied by deeper economic and defense cooperation. We have more trade agreements in this part of the world than any in other. We have comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. We have free trade agreements with ASEAN and Thailand. And we are now actively participating in concluding the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. I have just paid my first visit to Indonesia, India's neighbor, 90 nautical miles close and not 90 nautical miles apart. My friend, President Widodo, and I upgraded India-Indonesia relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Among other shared interests, we have a common vision for maritime cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. On way from Indonesia, I stopped over briefly in Malaysia to meet one of ASEAN's most senior leaders, Prime Minister Mahathir. Friends, India Armed Forces, especially our Navy, are building partnership in the Indo-Pacific region for peace and security, as well as humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They train, exercise, and conduct goodwill missions across the region. For example, with Singapore, we have the longest uninterrupted naval exercise, which is in its 25th year now. We will start a new trilateral exercise with Singapore soon, and we hope to extend it to other ASEAN countries. We work with partners like Vietnam and build mutual capabilities. India conducts Malabar exercise with the United States and Japan. A number of regional partners join in India's exercise Milan in the Indian Ocean and participate in RIMPAC in the Pacific. We are active in the Regional Cooperation Agreement on combating piracy and armed robbery against shift in Asia in this very city. Distinguished members of the audience, back home our principal mission is transforming India to a new India by 2022, when independent India will be 75 years young. We will sustain growth of 7.5% to 8% per year. As our economy grows, our global and regional integration will increase. A nation of over 800 million youth knows that their future will be secured not just by the scale of India's economy, but also by the depth of global engagement. More than anywhere else, our ties will deepen and our presence will grow in the region. But the future we seek to build needs a stable bedrock of peace. And this is far from certain. There are shifts in global power, change in the character of global economy, and daily disruption in technology. The foundations of the global order appear shaken, and the future looks less certain. For all our progress, we live on the edge of uncertainty, of unsettled questions and unresolved disputes, contents and claims and clashing visions and competing models. We see growing mutual insecurity and rising military expenditure. Internal dislocations turning into external tensions and new fault lines in trade and competition in the global commons. Above all, we see accession of power over recourse to international norms. In the midst of all this, there are challenges that touch us all, including the unending threat of terrorism and extremism. This is the world of interdependent fortunes and failures. And no nation can shape and secure it on its own. It is a world that summons us to rise above divisions and competition to work together. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. I see ASEAN as an example and inspiration. ASEAN represents the greatest level of diversity of culture, religion, language, governance, and prosperity of any grouping in the world. It was born when Southeast Asia was a front line of global competition, a theater of a brutal war, and a region of uncertain nations. Yet, today, ASEAN has united 10 countries behind a common purpose. ASEAN unity is essential for a stable future of this region, and each of us must support it, not weaken it. I have attended 4 East Asia summits. I am convinced that ASEAN can integrate the broader region. In many ways, ASEAN is already leading the process. In doing so, it has laid the foundation of the Indo-Pacific region. The East Asia Summit and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, 2 important initiatives of ASEAN, embrace this geography. Friends, the Indo-Pacific is a natural region. It is also home to a vast array of global opportunities and challenges. I am increasingly convinced with each passing day that the destinies of those of us who live in the region are linked. Today, we are being called to rise above divisions and competition to work together. The 10 countries of Southeast Asia connect the two great oceans in both the geographical and civilizational sense. Inclusiveness, openness, and ASEAN centrality and unity, therefore, lie at the heart of the new Indo-Pacific. India does not see the Indo-Pacific region as a strategy or as a club of limited members, nor as a grouping that seeks to dominate. And by no means do we consider it as directed against any country. A geographical definition as such cannot be. India's vision for the Indo-Pacific region is therefore a positive one, and it has many elements. The one, it stands for a free, open, inclusive region which embraces us all in a common pursuit of progress and prosperity. It includes all nations in this geography as also others beyond who have a stake in it. 2, Southeast Asia is at its center, and ASEAN has been and will be central to its future. That is the vision that will always guide India as we seek to cooperate for an architecture for peace and security in this region. The 3, we believe that our common prosperity and security require us to evolve through dialogue, a common rule-based order for the region, and it must equally apply to all individually as well as to the global commons. Such an order must believe in sovereignty and territorial integrity as well as equality of all nations, irrespective of size and strength. These rules and norms should be based on the consent of all, not on the power of the few. This must be based on faith in dialogue and not dependence on force. It also means that when nations make international commitments, they must uphold them. This is the foundation of India's faith in multilateralism and regionalism and of our principled commitment to rule of law. 4, we should all have equal access as a right under international law to the use of common spaces on the sea and in the air. That would require freedom of navigation, unimpeded commerce, and peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with international law. When we all agree to live by that code, our sea lanes will be pathways to prosperity and corridors of peace. We will also be able to come together to prevent maritime crimes, preserve marine ecology, protest against disasters, and prosper from blue economy. The 5, this region and all of us have benefited from globalization. Indian food is among the best example of these benefits. But there is growing protectionism in goods and in services. Solutions cannot be found behind walls of protection, but in embracing change. What we seek is a level playing field for all. India stands for open and stable international trade regime. We will also support rule-based, open, balanced, and stable trade environment in the Indo-Pacific region, which lifts up all nations on the tide of trade and investment. That is what we expect from regional comprehensive economic partnership. RCEP must be comprehensive as the name suggests and the principles declared. It must have a balance among trade, investment and services. The sixth, connectivity is vital. It does more than enhance trade and prosperity. It unites a region. India has been at the crossroads for centuries. We understand the benefits of connectivity. There are many connectivity initiatives in the region. If these have to succeed, we must not only build infrastructure, we must also build bridges of trust. And for that, these initiatives must be based on respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Consultation, good governance, transparency, viability, and sustainability. They must empower nations, not place them under impossible debt burden. They must promote trade, not strategic competition. On these principles, we are prepared to work with everyone. India is doing its part by itself and in partnership with others like Japan, in South Asia and Southeast Asia. In the Indian Ocean, Africa, West Asia and beyond. And we are important stakeholders in New Development Bank and the ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank. Finally, all of this is possible if we do not return to the age of great power rivalries. I have said this before. Asia of rivalry will hold us all back. Asia of cooperation will shape this century. So each nation must ask itself, are its choice building a more united world or forcing new divisions? It is a responsibility that both existing and rising powers have. Competition is normal, but contents must not turn into conflicts. Differences must not be allowed to become disputes. Distinguished members of this audience, it is normal to have partnership on the basis of shared values and interests. India too has many in the region and beyond. We will work with them individually or in formats of 3 or more for stable and peaceful region. But our friendships are not alliances of containment. We choose the side of principles and values, of peace and progress, not one side for divide or the other. Our relationships across the world speak for our position. And when we can work together, we will be able to meet the real challenges of our times. We will be able to protect our planet. We will be able to ensure non-proliferation. We will be able to secure our people from terrorism and cyber threats. In conclusion, let me say this again. India's own engagement in the Indo-Pacific region, from the shore of Africa to that of the Americas, will be inclusive. We are inheritors of Vedanta philosophy that believes in essential oneness of all and celebrates unity in diversity. Ekam satya vipraha baudha vadanti. Truth is one. The learned speaks of it in many ways. That is the foundation of our civilization ethos of pluralism, coexistence, openness, and dialogue. The ideals of democracy that define us as a nation also shape the way we engage the world. So, it translates into 5 S's in Hindi. Samman, respect. Samvad, dialogue. Sahyog, cooperation. Shanti, peace. And Samruddhi, prosperity. It is easy to learn these words. So, we will engage with the world in peace, with respect, through dialogue and absolute commitment to international law. We will promote a democratic and rule-based international order in which all nations, small and large, thrive as equal and sovereign. We will work with others to keep our seas, space, and airways free and open. Our nation secure from terrorism and our cyberspace free from disruption and conflict. We will keep our economy open and our engagement transparent. We will share our resources, markets, and prosperity with our friends and partners. We will seek a sustainable future for our planet and through the new International Solar Alliance, together with France and other partners. This is how we wish ourselves and our partners to proceed in this vast region and beyond. The ancient wisdom of the region is our common heritage. Lord Buddha's message of peace and compassion has connected us all. Together, we have contributed much to human civilization. And we have been through the devastation of war and the hope of peace. We have seen the limits of power. And we have seen the fruits of cooperation. This world is at a crossroad. There are temptations of the worst lessons of history, but there is also a path of wisdom. It summons us to a higher purpose. It rises above a narrow view of our interests and recognizes that each of us can serve our interests better when we work together. As equals in the larger good of all nations, I am here to urge all to take this path. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. Thanks a lot.
Prime Minister Modi at the Shangri-La Dialogue there. We still have Ambassador Arun Singh with us. Ambassador, he talked of a whole plethora of issues all the way from history to the present and to the future, but also stressing the fact that it is a partnership. There are no closed groups in this area and in India's relations with any other country.
So I think the speech was meant for the occasion, because at the Shangri-La Dialogue, as the Director General of IISS said, they're looking at defense diplomacy and they're looking at regional security policy. So the Prime Minister in his speech laid out how India saw the region and evolution of security challenges in the region. As you mentioned, he spoke a little bit about the traditional cultural connect to emphasize that this is not something new. It has been there for a long time. But he spent quite a bit of time explaining in detail our relations with each of the countries that have a stake in the region and the various organizations.
Japan, Korea, Australia, they were all mentioned.
United States,
US.
Japan, and Japan he described.
He's sitting on the table there with the Defense Secretary James Mattis, who's also part of the dialogue.
And then he spoke of the India-Japan relationship as a cornerstone of India's Act East policy. Then he described the relationship with the US, that there's a shared vision for the Indian Ocean and the Asia Pacific between India and the US, which was a statement that the two had issued in 2015 when President Obama had visited. He spoke about Russia and how during his recent meeting with President Putin, they emphasized the importance of multipolarity. So he spent quite some time explaining in detail India's interest in the region, the effort India has been making in the region with each of the countries. Then he also referred to several regional organizations of which India is a part, and therefore emphasizes India's relevance. Spoke of BIMSTEC, the Ganga-Mekong initiative, and the initiatives that India has taken, the India Ocean Naval Symposium, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, the East Asia Summit that he has participated.
He even mentioned the Solar Alliance in France at this forum.
Absolutely. Then he spoke about Africa, because Africa is at the other end of the Indian Ocean. What also struck me was that he spoke about several of the challenges. And in the challenges, he spoke about the shifting power equation, and which is very obvious because the relative balance between China and the United States is changing. He spoke about changing economic structures in the region, which is creating a lot of flux. The technology strengths in the region are changing. China is getting enhanced technological strength. US and Europe are feeling the challenge of that. He spoke about the role of technology, how it is transforming society. There was a reference to terrorism, a reference to challenge of protectionism, which is very current today with the effort that US is making. Again, found it both obvious and interesting that he referred to the connectivity projects without referring to the Belt and Road Initiative. But he spoke about how India traditionally had links, spoke about several such initiatives, and then brought in terms of principles, India's difficulties with the Belt and Road Initiative, saying that territorial integrity, sovereignty must be respected, there should be transparency, indebtedness should be avoided, they should be inclusive, and based on all that, India is ready to participate. And he spoke about the initiatives India has been taking along with Japan. So I would say, given the occasion, the speech really touched on all aspects that were required. The regional organizations, relations with each of the countries in the region, how India saw the future, and he spoke about how it should not be based on great power rivalry, but an effort at cooperation which will lead to prosperity and development, and how India has stakes in the region going on for some time.
This great power rivalry, even which the Prime Minister touched upon. Now, whatever India is strategically doing vis-a-vis China from the east to the west, he spoke about China and how India and China had worked to get past their differences, etc. So he's still making the correct diplomatic statements vis-a-vis China, even if India is working on different platforms.
Sure. So, in fact, in the context of China, he referred to his two-day informal summit with President Xi. And then he said that if the two countries work together based on trust and confidence, showing sensitivities to each other's interests, then it will contribute to a better world. So he's made that point. But the differences will be there, the challenges will be there. And although the Prime Minister said that it should not be a world based on great power rivalry, but historically the world has always been based on great power rivalry, and that will happen. And the rivalry between the US and China, for example, in that part of the world, which waxes and wanes, but it will be there. Because China is becoming a military and technological challenge to the US, and there are increasing efforts in the US going beyond just trade restrictions to also impose technology access restrictions for Chinese companies in the US, and that is bound to happen. And the US, when it looks at military challenges, clearly Russia is a big challenge. It sees North Korea as a very big challenge with its nuclear weapons and missiles, but it sees China as a growing challenge. China's presence in the South China Sea, militarization of islands there, China's effort to deny US area denial for access nearer to China. So all these are bound to happen. So the struggle will be there, but so long as people keep it within certain norms and with a mix of cooperation and competition, it will not lead to major disruption.
A mix of cooperation and competition, and I find that interesting. You're saying that when the Prime Minister also says differences should not be allowed to escalate into disputes. Now, vis-a-vis China and the position that China has in the South China Sea and various disputed islands there, the right of passage in the oceans, India's position is clear, as is the US, that there should be free navigation allowed, etc. India is also working on different countries in the region, including Vietnam. So how does India play this balancing game? While on one hand saying that we won't escalate anything, or both sides shouldn't, but yet we are also working strategically in the area.
So again, I think one of the statements that the Prime Minister made, that the approaches should be based on principles and not going behind one power or the other. So I think if we approach it using principles, that is perhaps the most effective way. And in South China Sea, clearly India's territorial interests are not involved. And they're the countries in the region, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, they all have territorial issues with China. So the primary concern is theirs. Our concern would be how does it impact on freedom of navigation? Because large part of our trade passes through that region. Same is the concern for United States, Japan. And they're facing an immediate challenge because US ships, Australian ships, which recently passed through that area, were challenged by Chinese ships. So they have to see how they enforce freedom of navigation in that area. So that is our concern. And we have to work with the countries in the region and others to try and ensure that freedom of navigation is maintained. And the Prime Minister specifically referred to that in his speech. So I think it will go, every power tries to enhance its area of outreach and influence. China, as it is rising, is going through that process. Others have to work, as people to say, to shape the environment around the rise of China so that the Chinese also see the costs of some policies that they are taking. And many have argued that of late China has tempered some of its policies because it is seeing that its kind of outreach it has done so far is generating a reaction, a negative reaction. And therefore, if they really want to become a global power, they need to tone down that negative reaction. So how do they do it? So these are things that will play out.
And in view of the focus that the Prime Minister has outlined in his speech here and India's strategic position, where does that place us vis-a-vis the focus that initially the US had put on the Pacific region, and now increasingly it's coming back again because of the Chinese position? The military, the naval command has been also renamed as the Indo-Pacific, even though that's just symbolic. Where does that leave India in terms of the US and China?
So the US has been trying to put more focus on the Pacific region, but it has gone up and down because they have challenges elsewhere, and they also have constraint of resources, despite having huge military expenditure equal to the total military expenditure of 7 other countries after them. For example, President Obama has spoken of rebalance to Asia. They couldn't implement it because they face challenges in Europe and in West Asia, where you see the crisis in Syria and other places. President Trump also spoke about meeting the military and economic challenge from China. But from time to time, he has spoken of great relationship with President Xi, looking for cooperation with President Xi in the context of North Korea. So how effectively they would look at positioning themselves in the Asia-Pacific region so that Chinese policies are based on not their power projection but some principles remains to be seen. But clearly it is one of the parameters in their policy that they should be seen as upfront in the context of the Asia-Pacific, the Indo-Pacific. If not, all their allies and partners will see that they are retreating. If they are seen as retreating, they will start aligning their interests with their rivals. And that would certainly not be in US interest. So given whatever constraints they may have on their resources, certainly they would want to project that they are not retreating from the region. And in this context, not only the relationship with China, but how does the equation with North Korea play out will be very important. There is possibility of President Trump meeting the North Korean leader soon. And what comes out from there will also be a signal of US resolve and strength. People are watching that. A
couple of sentences again, we're seeing exchange there. That was earlier, of course, soon after the Prime Minister's meeting between the US Defense Secretary James Mattis and the Prime Minister. Now, you've been wearing your Indian diplomatic and strategic hat. How would the Chinese be viewing what the Prime Minister has said today?
I think there's nothing that the Prime Minister has said here which would cause immediate enhanced concern to the Chinese, because much of it has been reiteration of India's position on the various issues. I think the Prime Minister's presence there, the kind of reception he has got and what he has said will be seen as the countries in the region recognizing India's role and status in that region. To some extent, they may not be very happy with that, but I think it's not something really new and dynamically different from what has been going on. So beyond recognizing that India has a certain role, relevance and stature in the region, they will of course continue doing whatever they've been doing, because as you know, their GDP is 5 times India's GDP. Their military expenditure is 5 times, and they're doing what they're doing in the region through the Belt and Road Initiative, other connectivity, and for example militarization of the South China Sea Islands. So they will take notice, but they will continue with what they're doing.
Ambassador Singh, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your views on the Prime Minister's speaking there at the Shangri-La Dialogue.